The city of Lagos never sleeps, but that night, in David's small apartment, silence hung heavy. The laughter and chaos of Ikorodu Road seemed miles away, though they were only a street over. David sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty noodle packs. He had watched his children grow pale and weak over the past few days. Ethan refused breakfast, Lola complained of headaches, and Jessica's face was etched with worry. He could no longer ignore it. There's something wrong with these noodles, he thought, his hands tightening around the cold plastic pack. The next morning, David resolved to find answers. He carried the remaining packs to a small local pharmacy, hoping someone could tell him what was in the noodles. The pharmacist, a middle-aged man named Mr. Okoye, took the pack from David, examining it carefully under the harsh fluorescent lights. Unusual, Mr. Okoye muttered, squinting at the label. No brand name, no proper ingredients, no expiration date. Cheap food like this, it may taste good, but it can be dangerous if eaten daily. David's stomach sank. Dangerous? He asked, his voice trembling. Yes, the pharmacist said quietly. Some cheap noodles use low-quality oils and additives that fill the stomach but do not nourish the body. If eaten frequently, especially by children, it can cause weakness, dizziness, digestive issues, even affect growth over time. David's hands shook. The warning was clear. The cheap noodles were slowly harming his family. Determined, David returned home and searched online. He discovered more stories from around Lagos. Children fainting after eating similar noodles. Adults complaining of constant fatigue. Families unknowingly consuming low-quality ingredients. Every article he read tightened the knot in his chest. Mr. Collins' noodles weren't just cheap, they were dangerous. That evening, David decided to confront the situation directly. At Mr. Collins' stall, the usual crowd had gathered, drawn by the irresistible aroma and low price. Children laughed, waving noodles like flags. Housewives argued over the last pack. Even the street vendors jostled for a bag to feed their families. David approached cautiously. Mr. Collins, he said, voice low but firm, I know what's in your noodles. They're not safe for daily consumption, especially for children. You're harming people. Mr. Collins' wide smile never faltered. Sir, you worry too much. My noodles are fine. Everyone loves them. Why question a good deal? David's hands shook with anger and fear. Safe. Children are sick, families are weak. You can't just sell something that hurts people. The crowd began to notice the tension. Some parents murmured nervously. Children stared, unsure what was happening. Mr. Collins leaned closer, voice smooth as silk. Sir, these noodles fill hunger. That is all most people care about. Why worry about tiny stomach aches or minor fatigue? David's heart pounded. Minor? This is my children. This is my family. That night, back home, the family sat quietly. Jessica held Ethan in her lap while Lola rested her head on the table. David placed the last packs of noodles in the trash, their cheap, plastic smell filling the kitchen one final time. I should have seen it sooner, David whispered. I should have protected you. Jessica held his hand tightly. You will from now on. No more shortcuts. No more cheap deals. And outside, on Ikorodu Road, Mr. Collins' stall gleamed faintly under the streetlights. The aroma of noodles still lingered in the air, tempting those who walked past. But for the first time, David and his neighbors had woken up to the truth. The cheap price was no longer the most important thing. Health and safety were. And tomorrow, the real battle for awareness would begin. The morning sun rose slowly over Lagos, painting the crowded streets of Ikorodu Road in golden light. The usual chaos of cars honking, street vendors shouting, and children laughing was accompanied by a strange undercurrent of tension. Today, something was different. David walked toward Mr. Collins' stall carrying his children's empty noodle packs, his jaw tight and hands trembling. Behind him, neighbors gathered, murmuring quietly among themselves. Word had spread. Families were feeling weak, children were faint, and all signs pointed to the cheap noodles. Mr. Collins stood behind his stall, his usual smile wide and perfectly practiced. He greeted each customer as if nothing had changed. "Good morning. Cheap noodles, full taste, half the price," he called out. David stepped forward, taking a deep breath. "Mr. Collins," he said, voice firm, "we need to talk." The crowd hushed. Housewives, children, and street vendors leaned in, curious and concerned. Some parents whispered anxiously to each other. "Is he going to complain? I hope they stop selling this stuff." David held up the empty packs. "My family has been eating these noodles. My children are sick. Others in the neighborhood are weak, dizzy, complaining. This is dangerous." Mr. Collins' smile never faltered. He leaned forward slightly, speaking calmly, almost hypnotically. "Sir, these noodles fill hunger. That is all most people care about. Why worry about minor complaints?" David's anger flared. His heart pounded. "Minor? My daughter fainted yesterday. My son cries from stomach pain. Minor? These are children, Mr. Collins. People trust you." A hush fell over the crowd. Some parents nodded, others gasped. Children clutched at their mothers' skirts, whispering worriedly. One brave neighbor, Mrs. Adams, stepped forward. "Enough. We trusted you, Collins. Our children eat your noodles every day. Now they are weak, sick, and tired. This cannot continue." Mr. Collins straightened, still smiling, though now there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "People like what I sell. Cheap, fast, tasty. That is all they want. Why question them?" David's voice grew louder. "Because what you sell is not safe. It may taste good, but it hurts people. It hurts our children." Some of the crowd began murmuring in agreement. A few parents pulled their children away from the stall. Others stared silently, realizing the same symptoms had been affecting their families. Then, a loud shout rang out. "My son almost collapsed yesterday. I saw it myself," said Mr. Bello, a neighbor. "Mine too," shouted another. "It's the noodles." The crowd grew restless. Children clung to their parents, street vendors looked worried, and the once lively stall now felt tense, almost dangerous. Mr. Collins' eyes flicked over the crowd. For the first time, his calm, practiced smile faltered. His voice lowered, almost a whisper. "Sir, these are just small complaints, nothing serious." David stepped closer, holding the packs of noodles high for all to see. "Nothing serious? You've hidden the truth behind a cheap price. You've let families eat this every day, ignoring the consequences. Today, it ends." The neighbors erupted in agreement. Some shouted, some clapped, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Slowly, one by one, they walked away from the stall, refusing to buy the noodles. Mr. Collins' smile disappeared completely. He looked around. The once packed stall was emptying fast. No one wanted his cheap noodles anymore. David turned to his family. Jessica held Ethan and Lola tightly. Their faces were pale, but there was relief in their eyes. "This is over," David whispered. And for the first time, the street was quiet. The smell of noodles lingered faintly in the air, but it no longer drew the crowd. Mr. Collins stood behind his stall, powerless as the people he had fooled walked away, protecting their families instead. David looked out at the street. The neighborhood had awakened. The lesson was clear. Cheap does not always mean good. And a price that seems too good to be true, often comes with a hidden cost. The morning sun rose over Lagos, but for the first time in days, Ikorodu Road felt different. The chaos of car horns, shouting vendors, and the smell of street food was still there, but the air carried a sense of caution and awareness. Families were no longer blindly chasing the cheapest deal. David walked with his family toward the small park at the end of the street. Lola held his hand, Ethan clutched Jessica's, and both children looked slightly brighter, though still pale from the past week. "Daddy, can we play?" Lola asked softly. David smiled, relief washing over him. "Yes, my love. Let's go." It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. After days of worry, watching their children weaken from cheap noodles, seeing them smile again was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Across the street, neighbors were talking in small groups. Mrs. Adams had gathered several families together. "We can't let this happen again," she said firmly. "My grandchildren are safe now because we stopped buying those noodles, but other families, other streets, may still be at risk." Parents nodded. They had learned a lesson the hard way: convenience and cheap prices could never replace caution, care, and quality. David joined the group. He held the empty noodle packs in his hands like evidence. "This is what we were eating," he said quietly. It looked harmless, cheap, easy. But it wasn't safe. Our children suffered. Your children may have too. We need to protect each other. A murmur of agreement ran through the group. The parents began to make a plan. Warn others in the neighborhood. Check the food they buy. Look out for each other's families. It was small, but it was a community standing together for the first time. That evening, David's family gathered at home. For the first time in days, the house felt peaceful. Lola and Ethan ate a healthy meal, prepared by Jessica, smiling as they finished slowly, savoring the taste. David watched them, his heart full of emotion. "I should have seen it earlier," he said softly. Jessica squeezed his hand. "You saw it now. That's what matters. We acted. We saved them." The children's laughter echoed through the apartment, a sound that had been missing for far too long. Outside, the city continued. Cars honked, street vendors shouted, and life in Lagos moved on. But the lesson lingered. Cheap food could fill a stomach, yes. But it could also hide danger that was invisible until it was too late. Over the next few days, the community continued to act. Families stopped buying from Mr. Collins' stall. Word spread across nearby streets. Parents warned each other, and children learned to ask questions before eating anything new or cheap. Even though Mr. Collins was still there, trying to sell his noodles with the same practiced smile, the crowd was gone. His charm and cheap prices no longer held power over a neighborhood that had awakened. David watched from his balcony as parents walked past the stall with their children, ignoring it completely. His family, finally healthy again, waved at friends in the street. This is what it means to take action, David thought. To protect those you love, even when the choice seems small. And for the first time, David realized that the turning point wasn't just about the noodles. It was about awareness, courage, and community. The city of Lagos never truly sleeps, but for David, that night, the apartment felt peaceful. The distant sounds of traffic and vendors were a background hum rather than chaos. Lola and Ethan were asleep, breathing evenly, their small bodies finally free from the lingering effects of the cheap noodles. David sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty packs he had thrown into the trash days ago. The plastic crinkled under his fingers, a sharp reminder of how a tiny choice could ripple through lives, leaving consequences far beyond what anyone imagined. Jessica came and sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You've learned something important," she said softly. David nodded, eyes heavy with thought. "Yes. I thought half price was a good deal. I ignored the signs. I let convenience blind me. I let my family eat something harmful because it was cheap. And I almost didn't notice until it was too late. Jessica squeezed his hand. Most people don't see it. They think cheap is smart. But smart isn't cheap, it's careful, thoughtful, and cautious. You acted before it was too late. The next morning, David took a walk down I-Corridor Road. The streets were alive, as always, but something had changed. Parents were talking quietly to each other, glancing at their children as they played. Neighbors were exchanging information, warning each other about cheap food, teaching their children to ask questions before eating anything unfamiliar. David noticed Mr. Collins' stall still there, the banner flapping in the morning breeze. But the crowd that had once surrounded it like bees to honey was gone. Few people approached, and those who did walked away after a quick glance at the cheap packs. The power of awareness, David realized, was stronger than cheap price. Knowledge could protect a family, a neighborhood, even a city. That afternoon, David gathered the neighborhood children and parents in the small park. He spoke carefully, his voice calm but firm. "Listen," he said, holding up one of the empty packs. "I want you all to remember this. Cheap food, half-price deals, they can hide dangers we don't see. My family suffered. Your children might have too. Always check what you eat. Always ask questions. Don't let price blind you to safety." Parents nodded. Children listened wide-eyed. Some looked at their own snack packs in realization. Mrs. Adams stepped forward. "And remember," she added, "we are responsible for each other. We must watch out for our families and our neighbors. That is how we survive in this city." The crowd murmured in agreement. The lesson had been learned, deeply and painfully, but it was now part of their shared wisdom. Back at home, David watched his children play. Lola laughed freely for the first time in days. Ethan ran to him, still giggling despite his recent weakness. Jessica smiled, relief washing over her face. David held them close. "I won't let anything like that happen again," he whispered. "Cheap price can never replace caution and care," he added, more to himself than anyone else. Outside, the city of Lagos carried on. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and life flowed as usual. But something had changed. The street, the neighborhood, and the families had awakened to the hidden dangers of convenience and cheapness. And David knew, deep in his heart, that this lesson would stay with them forever. The sun rose slowly over I-Corridor Road, casting a golden glow over Lagos. The streets were busy as always, vendors shouting, motorcycles weaving, children laughing, but for once, there was a sense of caution and awareness in the air. David stepped outside with his family. Lola skipped beside him, Ethan clutched Jessica's hand, and both children's faces were bright and healthy again. Their laughter, once faint and tired, rang freely down the street. But David's mind lingered on the lessons of the past weeks. Cheap noodles. Half price. So small a choice, yet so dangerous. At the end of the street, Mr. Collins' stall still stood. The banner flapped in the wind. Cheap noodles, half price. But the crowd that had once flocked to it like moths to a flame was gone. Parents held their children close, murmuring warnings to each other. The laughter and chaos that had surrounded the stall had vanished. Mr. Collins leaned on his counter, his usual confident smile now forced, almost faltering. He watched families pass by, refusing his noodles, ignoring his calls. For the first time, he realized that cheapness alone could not guarantee trust. David paused in front of the stall, holding his children close. He spoke aloud, not just to Mr. Collins but to the world around him. Price is not the only thing that matters. Convenience is not a measure of safety. We learned that the hard way. My family, and perhaps many others. Cheap things, can come at a price too high to pay. A hush fell over the street. Parents nodded in agreement. Some wiped tears from their eyes, thinking of the children who had suffered, even slightly, from the invisible effects of the noodles. That evening, back at home, the family gathered for dinner. This time, it was real, nourishing food. Jessica had prepared fresh vegetables, rice, and chicken. Lola and Ethan ate slowly, savoring every bite, their laughter filling the small apartment. David looked at his children, then at Jessica. His heart swelled with gratitude. "We were lucky," he whispered. "We saw the danger. We acted. And we survived it together." Jessica smiled, eyes shining. "Yes, and we learned something more important than cheap prices or tasty smells. We learned to choose carefully, care deeply, and protect what matters most." Outside, the city moved on. Cars honked, motorcycles weaved, vendors shouted, and children ran through the alleys. But the streets of Ikorodu Road had changed subtly. Families were watching, aware. Parents spoke with each other about food, safety, and choices. The lesson of the cheap noodles had spread quietly but deeply. And as for Mr. Collins, by nightfall, the stall was gone. The banner, the aroma, and the promise of half-priced noodles had vanished. He had disappeared as quietly as he had arrived, leaving only a warning for those who might be tempted by cheapness without thought. David sat on the balcony, looking out at the lights of Lagos. His children played nearby, happy, healthy, and safe. The city seemed endless, vast, alive, and full of choices. He thought of the noodles, the cheap price, and the invisible danger. Some prices are too high to pay, even when the deal looks perfect. And with that thought, he smiled, knowing that his family had survived, learned, and grown stronger.